So hello everyone, welcome to my channel once again. I hope everyone's doing okay. So in this video, I'm going to talk about data a little bit. So moving data from one place to another is not an easy thing, okay? So especially true when the system is still live, the data is being read from one database and then it's also being written to the same database and all that, so the database is functional, it's hot database, there's entries, new entries, there's things being deleted and all that. So you got to be really careful. You can't just what you can't do obviously is just shut your site for a couple of days and then take the data from one place to another. Okay, I mean, you can do that if it's a small site, but generally when the site gets bigger, you got to be careful with these sort of things. So I'm gonna cover a couple of things that you should keep in mind when you're transferring data and you're in a situation like this. So the first thing you should keep in mind is the number of records. Okay, now when the data is copied from one place to another, let's say it's a manual copy, okay? Let's say you take the big chunk of the data from first database and you paste it into the second database. Now we know that while you're doing this, there is going to be new entries, but let's ignore that for 1 second. Okay, you copy the database from one place to another, okay? You take the dump, you import it into the new database, right? Now, once it's been copied, you have to make sure that the records match. So you gotta write down the timestamp when you started to copy the data and write down the number of records that were in the first database, okay? And once the data has copied onto the second database, then you have to check if there has been correct number of records. There has been copied correct number of records in the new database. So you would run something like count across multiple tables and check if it matches the number of rows in both databases. Obviously, you're not going to go to each table and count the number of records, but you can do that if you want to, right? That's one way. That is something important. You should do it, okay? Now you can write an automated script that can get you that. I'm sure there is SQL commands that can do that as well. I think with something like MySQL Workbench, you can see number of rows and you just match that manually. That's one way to do it. And again, you have the data into your new database. You copy the data into your new database. Now, sometimes it's not just the data. It's also about files and all that. You could have JSON files. You could have many other files, Second thing is you have to make sure the files are still valid, they haven't been corrupted when they were copied from one place to another, okay? So what you can do is you can create a hash of the files while they're still sitting in the first file system of the database, and then you compare that hash. Once they've been copied, you just check if the hash is still correct. Okay, if the hash is correct, then yeah. A lot of people like to check the file size. That's one way to do it. It works, it doesn't work sometimes, but hash is normally how people do check if the file has been copied across without being corrupted. Now, the third thing is that you have to make sure that the data is being copied in a correct manner using correct algorithm. So you can't just take a dump of the data and then just drop it into a new server. And it's gonna probably crash your server. There's gonna be timeout. You will have to make so many tweaks on the server. Just get the server make sure the server is capable of receiving that file without crashing. Okay, so you have to make sure that you do this transition in chunks. You can divide the files and you can copy it. For example, you can copy the tables table by table. You can copy it in chunks. For example, you could copy, for example, 100, 1,000 records, and then 1,000 again, and then you keep doing this until. But then at the end of the day, you still need to make sure the authenticity of the files, and then make sure you have copied the correct amount of files or the data or the rows, whatever you're copying. Okay, then the fourth thing is this is where a lot of people get this is where they actually screw up, okay? they'll copy the data from one place to another. They won't verify authenticity of the file. They won't verify if the data has been copied successfully. All uh, they will check is that yes, I can see this file, or yeah, yes, I can see the new tables. Okay, that's all they check, and that's wrong, obviously, um, because a lot of times when you're doing well, it depends on the tool. Your tool is not always going to tell you what went wrong, so you have to check these things manually, especially if this is sensitive data, right? So they'll copy the data from one place to another. They'll assume it has copied successfully, and then they will just get rid of the first initial database, right? So they'll switch the DNS, they'll change the endpoints in their net system, and then they'll get rid of they'll get rid of the first database. And later down the line, a couple months later, they'll realize, oh shit, this piece of information did not copy properly. This blob from this column did not copy across properly. There is an issue with the UTM or something like that, the data encoding, and then they'll want to go back to the initial database that's no longer there. So they don't have the database, and now there's a huge issue. They have to manually fix the database or the files. They'll have to run some sort of scripts to fix it, and it's no fun, because the new database is going to be constantly updated. So you will have two pieces of data, one that's correct, another one that is wrong. And then what some people also do is they like to do hot copy of the database. So that means you will let your system write to the initial database, okay? And I just fix the camera here. So they will let the file write to the first database. As it's writing, it'll create the same entry into the second database. So eventually, well, the first time you do it is going to take time, right? Because it has to copy the huge chunk of database across to the new database. You can do it with a script, but if you're using something like Amazon, I think it has a feature to do that. So the data is being written on the first database. It'll automatically be copied to the second database. So you have two databases, right? Both in sync at the same time, and then you can have a little bit of downtime, and then you can switch the endpoints. That's another way to make sure your data is copied correctly. Then I guess another thing is just the basic stuff, right? You make sure you have enough capacity. You make sure your new database is compatible. All the columns that you're copying from first database to the second can actually be copied. It has enough space. It can accommodate the data types and all that. So it's just the basic things. And then lastly, just going through my notes here. Lastly is just making sure, again, the authenticity of the data. That's the most important thing. You don't want to just dump the data from one place to another and then assume, because there is no errors, it has been copied correctly. Okay, so once it has been copied, you still need to go into your database engine, run some queries, and make sure that you have all the data there. Okay, just because you have a data type in first database, you cannot just automatically assume that data type will be valid in the second database as well, especially if you're changing the engines. Now, if it's the same database, like for like, then it might be okay, but you still need to run a lot of queries to make sure that you have the data, And well, this is what I generally do. This is just a couple of the things I do when I'm migrating the data from one place to another, or files. It's not just the database. It's files. It's XML files. It's many other things. Now, if you kind of follow these steps, just do it with patience and don't rush. You might be okay, but obviously there is still room for a lot of things to go wrong. So these are the couple of things I would advise. Obviously, there is many more things you can do, but if you're just careful, if you just don't get rid of old database, if you don't ruin the data. For example, the data is being written on the first database, and then the second database is missing certain column, while that column in the first database is nullable. Now the second database, you for some reason everything is empty there, whatever went wrong, things are empty. Then slowly, as the database gets bigger and bigger, and you start writing to the new one, you will have problem where it'll be nightmare to replicate that there, especially when the team has already started to work on the new database. They have made some changes to the data, they have written some scripts. So you got to be careful with that. I think at the end of the day, you got to make a solid plan. It's the thing about switching database from one place to another. It's not the downtime that's the issue. It's the most important thing is the planning bit. You have to plan in advance. Just write a whole doc. What can go wrong? If things do go wrong, what are you gonna do, right? Let's say you mirroring the database from one place to another. You switch the endpoints. Now it's pointing to the new database, and then 2 days later, the new database crashes or something like that. What's gonna happen then, right? Obviously, you can, as a search or whatever, you can restart the service. You can try just do your due diligence, the basic stuff. But if it does happen, what are you gonna do? All these things need to be in a plan, right? So yeah, those are things sometimes I do. There's a couple more things I do, but that's all for now. Good luck.